Okay, so yeah, collaboration is a word in the air right now, as you rightly mentioned, Sri Saila. So, I mean, just before starting, a standard disclaimer: the views are of mine and not of my organization I'm representing. So, collaborations, right? Data operations and clinical operations. So, the way my perspective or the way I look at it. So, this is how the agenda looks like. So, the data operations can be within or versus across, so that I will show in a moment how it becomes within as well as across between data operations and clinical operations, how that collaborations can be established and how better the collaborations can be made stronger. And then this is how the short agenda which I'm going to present today. So let's understand the landscape. Definitely, most of the audience who are attending today, those who must have started their career even just now, probably they will be able to easily correlate how things works at the typical clinical development project level team. So there is a team member from data management, from biostatistics and statistical programming, as we have seen from the various presenters since morning, that we have representations from the various different line functions. So what their typical roles are. So typically they are involved in the data management activities are mainly focused on data collections as in conjunctions with the contributing members from clinical as well as from the statistics, because the analysis which will be primarily based on data collections and the objectives. And when it comes to the data collections which needs to be submitted, as Srishala covered, some of the aspects, how the submissions could be prepared based on the various packages using SAS and the others which are available nowadays, evolving like R and others. So these are the collaborations which typically the set of functions will be part of the clinical project team. This is the team which probably are evolving. I think in last probably couple of years, it is evolving quite faster. These are the disciplines like big data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, and the others which other presenters have covered, like natural language processors and the other neural networks. So this typical discipline, the combinations of three, big data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence, certainly could help the clinical development program, which the leadership team is putting in place from the various clinical development strategies from the pharmaceuticals or the biotech companies which are putting in place. Sorry. In order to make a robust clinical development program, because as you may have heard in the industry nowadays, the trend is also ongoing in order to refine the strategies by using synthetic arms, meaning that whatever the data is available from the past experience, from the various drug development programs which pharma companies have taken in past over probably in decades and decades of data collections, they can put down those details and make simulations using synthetic arm approach, which will help them to define how the overall clinical development strategy should be aligned so that they get the right amount of patients in a very efficient way, meaning that the recruitment could be quite competitive, and at the same time they are targeting the right specific patients based on the profiling, as nowadays we have some of the gene specific or the mutation specific. If I give an example of oncology space, and typically in the oncology for the lung cancer. So if I give you an example of specific mutations like RAS or BRAF mutations, those patients will be responding to a treatment coming from the lung cancer as compared to others who doesn't have those mutations. So this way, the companies can focus on doing a targeted recruitment based on the mutations. So now let's talk about how clinical operations can collaborate. And in clinical operations, as you know that, what are the typical arrangements or the functional activities. So they have to do a site qualifications based on the typical study that needs to be executed. So they have to do qualifications, selections, and initiation based on the informations what the various hospitals or the clinical sites provide to them. Then the next obvious step will be the recruitment and the monitoring and the site closeout. So if the clinical operations team at the project level are able to use the information which I gave in my previous slides, like using across the disciplines like big data, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, this way they will be able to do a better qualifications, the selections, uh, and at the same time, definitely initiations comes much later, but the qualification and selections are the quite fundamental steps in order to select the right set of sites for doing recruitment, because that is the way the typical clinical project management and the monitoring team will be looking at, because that will help them to identify key trends and how they can exceed the targets. Now, I would like to give some examples from the past experience. So, I mean, this is coming from the buzzword right now, which is a COVID, and the COVID belongs to the infectious disease landscape. So, what happens in the years of 1960s, where typically, as you may have read in that era, when the big data which was there from the antibacterial development strategies. So those were the areas when we started seeing the development of the antibacterial landscape which was developed. And by the time the humans reached in the era of 1970s, at that time there was an idea that probably the infectious disease landscape will no more require any further development. And we are right now in 2020, and we were visualizing that there would be a science fiction movies ongoing, and the people will be receiving the treatment or getting a cure quite faster in the era of big data. But still we are struggling with the COVID-19, and everyone is trapped in their own whatever the boundaries and secure and safe places. So what the big data, as you know, that there are 4 V's. I mean, I will not go in details, but that gives us a lot of information when I talk about from 1960s till the 2020 in the infectious disease landscape. As the human races have identified more than around 800 plus virals which are known to the human families, which can infect, and still we are learning more, because as you know that the COVID, I mean, as recent as I was reading in the morning that the COVID from where it came, the Science Journal just published that it came from evolution has happened from bat to pangolin, and from pangolin to man. That's how the COVID has come. This is just a very most recent update came from a science journal. So as you can see how much value creation it can bring, and the health surveillance, right? It is more important because as you may have read that the COVID started very much early, in the early days in November 19, somewhere in China, and then eventually it spread it across the globe in no time, and then and all of a sudden who had to declare in the month of February that this is a global pandemic, and this is going to be a uncontrolled situations as we realize, and we confine to our safe zones. This way, as you may have read in the news that how many companies are in the race of developing the treatment or the vaccines for the COVID. So there's more information as we learn about COVID. So these are the all strategic decisions as we learn more, and the more and more information will be available for the audience or for the various scientific community who is working on development of the treatment and vaccines. The data will be analyzed, and further the strategies will be refined for developing a potential treatment or a vaccine for the COVID. So now look at how that specific collaborations, the establishing collaborations as we see in the last slide, but now how it can be a stronger collaboration tool going forward. So the clinical decision development that can be developed using, as we have seen from our past presenters, like Sri Shaila talked about how the submissions, how the various tools can help us to exchange information from across the tool, analyzing information. At the same time, as most recent as Jagruti mentioned, what are the various sources? Like we have EHRs, clinical development programs from the past. So all these informations can give us an aggregate picture, which will help us to spot any problem or probably help us to refine strategies which are there for us to give us an idea that how better we can align our strategies, as you may have read that in the year 2014 when Ebola broke out. So Ebola broke out at the time. I mean, so the fatality rate was quite high as compared to COVID, but at the same time, because as soon as the Ebola broke out happened, at that time, governments were currently the governments are responding to the situations of COVID the same way they were able to respond to that situation. And it got control in around less than 8 months time. So I mean that's how the situations can be. Probably I'm quite optimistic. It could be the same situations for COVID as well, and this will help us do a good surveillance, right? Because as you know that for the surveillance purpose, what level of surveillance, so there are certain modelings the FDA have developed, like predict models. So for predict model, what the scientists have done, they have collaborated with the cross countries. Means more than 20 countries are participating in the predict modeling, and there they are trying to find out the various countries' climatic situations, how the health access systems are responding. And nowadays, as you know, that the internet prevalence is quite high. So they are also trying to find out using Twitter, Facebook, how the people are responding or posting any situations like disease conditions that can also be included as part of the surveillance system. And based on the geographical details available, who are posting those disease specific conditions online, in that way this model can find out that how many people got in touch with the various members who have posted any specific disease conditions or reported any disease specific symptoms over the various social medias, or they have collated informations through health records at the clinics what they have visited. So this is all aggregate information which will feed into the model of predict, which will further help them to understand whether this will result into any major disease or infectious disease outbreak like the one which is ongoing, or how they can avoid specific. So as one of the examples in the south of in the African countries, where as you may know, Kenya, where you have heard that there are many monsoon months there, and based on that there are certain fever conditions which based on the predict modeling they were able to control the pandemic situations and how they can reduce the overall number of mortality based on those Kenya specific fever conditions. So this is the way how big data and the various healthcare system can help us to respond to those pandemic situations, how we can try to avoid. In that way, we can also try to improve efficiencies on identifying, as I was talking in one of my previous slide, that if they are able to find out using electronic health records or any pandemic situations which is ongoing in particular country, and if they should be included as part of any clinical development strategies. So, I mean, so as we know that there are countries in COVID like US, in Europe, like countries like Italy, Spain, in Asia, countries like Korea, Japan, and India. So those are the countries could be a potential sites for if someone would like to include any patients recruitment strategies. I think going forward, that is how the specific company would be looking for those kind of strategies. And this will help to develop any specific conditions for treatment or for vaccines like for COVID situations. So that is how the development strategies could be fine-tuned. And I know it was quite faster for me to cover up. So this is the reference I referred. I would request the attendees to go through. This is a quite good database which will give you an idea from drug development, from the healthcare economics, and from the big data as well. So I took some of examples from the big data analytics. There was a workshops which was done for the infectious disease by FDA and other cross-country bodies, and you will find some of those examples from this website as well. And before we conclude and I open for the sessions, just would like to open, just would like to share some facts with the audience. So why health industry is more important, and you can take a proud moment because you are part of the whole value chain, which is contributing for the betterment of humanity. Because we are part of the health industry, and health industry which is quite huge. Just to give you an idea, in the year 2018, we were around just tad less than 9 trillion US dollar, and every year we are growing. And as you know that when we are growing industry, there are chances of having a recession. But as you know that the cost of having a healthcare is going exponentially. I think big data and the collaborations between the data operations team and the clinical team has to grow more and more. And I think the importance will grow more because we would like to have in reduction in overall spending. At the same time, the affordability that is particularly in the Asia, the South Asian countries, as well as in the African countries which are so poorer. So affordability becomes more important. So the collaborations, the faster we are able to bring the treatments or the vaccines to the patients in the COVID situations, the better. Because as per one of the recent reports, because of the COVID-19, there would be some 12 million people who would be pushed into again into the extreme poverties who came out in the last 2 decades or so. So that is a very tough situations to be when you don't have access to the food, like basic needs of health and others. So I think our jobs become more important as we are part of that whole value chain and we are part of the data operations group. I think that's how I would say that's the take home message. Whatever the we can take certainly proud one more time as part of the whole value chain, as part of the drug development group. So with that, I would like to request Jay Pandian if there are any questions.